I'm Anna Webb. Welcome to A Dog's Life. Hey, Mr. Binks, you know how much I love art and how I love art history, particularly when it's relating to dogs. Well, that's why we're jumping on Zoom now to talk to art critic Estelle Lovatt about the recent collection in the Wallace Collection called Portraits of Dogs, the Faithful and the Fearless. Estelle Lovatt, thank you for joining me on A Dog's Life.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.
Well, I'm so excited about this conversation because we kind of began it in the radio studio at BBC London a couple of weeks ago on the day that this amazing collection called Portraits of Dogs opened in the Wallace Collection.
Yeah, it is an extraordinary exhibition. You know, I didn't want to leave.
I was so disappointed when we got to the end, and I wanted to open the door and think there's got to be another room at least ahead of us.
It was almost, you know what it was? I felt a sense of having received meditation or therapy. You know, it was so calming, and I haven't received that going through an exhibition before. You know, I've been excited by the artworks that I've seen before, particularly by favorite artists of mine, but going through this exhibition and seeing a lot of work that I hadn't seen before really made me feel, I mean, I wanted to stroke the paintings, but of course you can't. But you know, I felt an affinity with them. I felt that you know, they say the Mona Lisa, her eyes follow you around the room. I felt as though these dogs' eyes or their tails were following me around the room. I felt warm and fuzzy.
You know what? Gosh, that's such a wonderful way of describing it. I was just so excited about going in, you know, because it had been hyped up for a long time. I'd seen the posters on the underground and, oh, you know, and I thought, oh, God, I can't wait. I know, because dogs in art has always fascinated me because, you know, I did A-level art, you know, I can roughly do a bit Estelle, but, you know, and I wanted to do my art foundation, but my dad obviously wouldn't let me because I had to do an academic degree, blah, blah. But anyway, I absolutely adore the history that defines our dogs through art, because dogs, you know, have been with us side by side for 30,000 years. And this collection, I felt it could have been bigger, as we said. But yes, those dogs, they all capture a moment in time that really existed through the eyes of some of the greatest painters that have ever lived.
Yeah, and each dog, whether it be in a painting or a drawing or a sculpture, each dog had their own personality, like we know that dogs do. You know, it wasn't just a generic cartoon caricature of a dog. Each one had a personality, and I felt as though I knew each one personally, just looking at them. It was incredible, you know, really incredible when you think about the expertise of brush marks or expertise of sculpting fingers that the artist has, but to get a presence and a soul and a glint in the eye that you feel as though if you got up any closer, you'd feel the breath of the dog up on your face. I mean, that's something exceptional, really.
It really is. And I think it's something that doesn't exist anymore, because now artworks, you know, are created by, you know, many are brilliant, obviously brilliant. I've got a couple of quite brilliant pieces here, you know, from modern artists. And in fact, actually, the ones that I have 3 portraits of moles, my first bull terrier that I adore, and all of those were done by, one was Robert Clark, but he came to see Molly in person. He did take photos of Molly, but in person. And I think, you know, that's the best we can do now. But these artists back then had no cameras. So these works would have taken ages, I should imagine, and a lot of time, you know, with the artist just watching the dog move around, sniff around, just spending time with the particular subjects. to capture the essence of their personalities. And I think that is something that we've lost.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And the fact that there are no humans depicted in the artworks makes me feel as though I entered another world. You know, I entered the canine world, which I think if more people gave dogs the respect they deserve, I think we'd feel so much better about ourselves. I mean, we know and we hear of awful tragedies that occur to dogs who aren't cared for properly around the world. But I think this shows a compassion, a passion, and a sensitivity that if we show them, they will show us. And you know what else I find absolutely extraordinary? If you go back in history, and I know that we've spoken about this before, but if you go back to the prehistoric times, when dogs were depicted perhaps as wolves, but on rocks or on cave walls as hunters and companions and guardians and guides, if you like, how much they teach us. Why do you think that Leonardo da Vinci, and amongst his anatomical studies, there's a fantastic piece in this art exhibition, isn't there, Anna?
Yes.
Of dog's paws. Why do you think he was so interested in depicting how a dog stands, its paws and its claws? Well, the reason was, from a scientific point of view, we know that what a great polymath Renaissance man Da Vinci was. It was by looking at dogs, for example, and other animals, granted, but the dogs in this instance, to see how he could create machinery. You know, how with the force of a pull or a gesture of a push, how things go back and forward. So it's not just that he's drawing a dog's paw, but he's looking at how he can connect things, sinews, muscles, bone in the real world, whether it be using string or corn or flint or whatever it is, to make things work.
Yes, and that's something my art teacher always used to say to me, you know, Anna, you need to have the dog under the paint.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, yeah, absolutely. But you know, this is a showcase. I just think the curator who came on the radio as well, Xavier, Estelle,
Right.
yes, the selection was brilliant because 300 years is a long time. But as you say, there was this Leonardo sketch of the paw and the forelimb, unbelievable detail, you know. And but Leonardo back to the Renaissance. So when was the Renaissance, Estelle? About what?
Well, that's
1670, 1400s?
yeah, yes, you're talking about Leonardo da Vinci,
Yeah.
And Michelangelo and Raphael.
So with the Renaissance, so absolutely the Michelangelos and the Raphael and the Leonardos, but in all of their works, like The Last Supper, they've all got something in common. They've all got dogs in, haven't they, Estelle?
It's amazing because symbolically in art we know that the dog isn't just a pet or a hunter, but we know that the dog is an indicator of being faithful, of fidelity. You know, where do you think the saying of being a lapdog comes from? So dogs are there in art to show our faithful companion all by our side. And when you look at Hogarth's, for example, whenever there's some sort of trouble brewing, you'll always see a dog snarling or creeping backwards. Whereas if things are all good, then the dog's wagging his tail and he's sat smiling. Actually, there is that lovely
Yes.
Trump, isn't there, by Hogarth?
Yes,
Not the president.
No, it was an unfortunate name. I think he called all his books. See, Hogarth adored pugs, and I think he devised, even invented the adjective called pugnacious to describe their personalities. Which, you know, many pugs are still pugnacious. They're grand little characters, but what fine art defines as well is the change in the breeds, especially where the pug is concerned, because in the Wallace collection there is a marble little statuette, isn't there, of Trump the pug, Hogarth's actual pug, which doesn't look like a pug at all. I mean, if you had to guess the breed, you would definitely not say pug or for this sculpture. And it highlights how over time we've changed breeds. We've and most recently selected for features which people are now trying to unselect for, and we as humans have kind of distorted dogs a bit. That's reflected clearly through this collection, not least, you know, that's sounds awful to say it through a microphone, but you know, the stuffed Pekingese.
Yes.
I mean, oh wow. I mean, for me, that was a Tibetan Spaniel. I mean, it is a Tibetan Spaniel, not a Pekingese. You would not say, if someone, you know, anyone saying what breed of dog is that, they would not say Pekingese. So different is it? They'd say Tibetan Spaniel, you know. The Pekingese today doesn't look anything like that. And that's kind of an education as well. And I'm actually saying to all my dog clients at the moment, please go and see this exhibition to see how dogs were in the mid 1800s, you know, because there's that lovely portrait, is it, of a Havanese in a Parisian boudoir, Estelle?
Oh yeah.
And that proves people were training dogs way back in the mid 1800s.
Yeah, and isn't it extraordinary how, you know, we think we know dogs through having our own dog or seeing our neighbor's dog, but you're right, you know, how they changed physically over the years. This is a really unexpected find, really. And although these artworks have been collected from all over the UK, actually just the UK, because one of the things they wanted to do, being restricted obviously by a budget, having come through COVID, and also to want to try and be PC and cut carbon emissions, they only collected the works from UK collections. So we're lucky to have them in London. They've come from, example, Liverpool and Tunbridge Wells and Burnley. So this is a great chance for us to see how the dogs have changed. You know, we think of our ancestors, if we think of them as our ancestors, they've really changed. You know, how they've gone from being working dogs, hunting dogs, if you like, to being our companions. And I suppose Landseer is one of the greatest to pay homage to our love of dogs, especially under special conditions or if you like, restrictions. He really was, and that's of course Queen Victoria's favourite artist, Landseer. But there's a story as well that says that if anybody if he wanted anyone to criticize his artwork, he would get dogs to have a look at it, and if they seemed quite happy, then he'd be happy.
Who said that? Gosh, Estelle, was that Sir Edwin Landseer?
Yes.
Oh wow, because it was one of his paintings that totally blew my mind at the Wallace Collection. It was the one with the Greek name. So he was using dogs to portray a moment in Greek mythology, with the big white dog that was billed as a bull terrier. And in the bottom right corner of that painting, there literally is an example of Mr. Binks, my English toy terrier's ancestor, in that right hand corner. It is without doubt an English toy terrier, which it would have been because they were bred and selected in the mid 1800s to kill rats. So
really, to kill specifically for that?
Yes, that was their main purpose in life, actually. They were small, they were agile, they have huge teeth, even today. The English toy terrier, Mr. Biggs has got the biggest canines you've seen in your life for a dog that's only 9 inches high. And yes, and Hogarth captured, there is an etching. And also in the Victorian era, they loved blood sports, you know, Estelle.
Yes.
We didn't have the internet. Dog fighting was a legal sport down at the local tavern. And what they used to do with the toy terriers, they used to have this great big container, and they used to fill it with hundreds of rats. and then they'd stick toy terriers into this big pit full of rats, and then people would bet on the dog that would kill the most rats in the shortest amount of time. And the great winner that is, known, and he lived down in the city of London, actually. He was called Tiny Tim, and he was the world record holder at the time. But yes, Mr. Binks is in this artwork. Now, please remind me of the name of this painting.
Alexander and Diogenes.
Yeah, the painting I mean, like it's pretty impressive. It's big, and there's a big white dog in the middle who's obviously coming strutting. And this dog looks like a cartoon character, but it can't have been, because cartoons didn't exist in 1848, and Landseer would have painted what he saw. And this is basically probably the first cross of what was the Old English Bulldog with the Old English White Terrier, which is now extinct, that they crossed the dogs to make the Bulldog less heavy, more aquiline, more dynamic, sadly, for dog fighting, because they wanted dogs because it was a sport. And there it is, what I reckon is the first cross of, I'm quite emotional, of the Old English Bulldog crossed with the Old English White Terrier, which is the ancestor to all bull terriers in the world.
And is that the painting where on the right hand side there's a few other dogs of different breeds who are sort of looking adoringly,
well, or in trepidation, whichever way you want to read their expressions. Yeah. So obviously this big dog's come in to sort something out. Some fracas, some minor argument going on in the hood, and I saw it and I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting as well, because what you were saying, the advice that your art teacher gave you, when you look at the paintings, they look solid, don't they? They look as though there is a dog skeleton and muscle underneath the fur. So it's not just that they've got the softness, as in this painting that you're talking about by Landseer, the softness of the fur, but there's also the bulk and the meat, if you like, underneath.
Well, definitely in that bull terrier, isn't it? I mean, it's like muscular. He's got the power.
Yeah.
It's almost like if the dog's moving across, it's got a presence and aura about him, which is correct. But it's captured just kind of like one-dimensionally. It's extraordinary. But then we move through the centuries, don't we, at quite a pace, Estelle, with the exhibition, which is also amazing because of the contrast of the art.
Yeah, it brings you right up to today. But it's nice as well, especially now, whilst we're all sort of gearing up in one way or another for King Charles III's coronation. It was nice, and we know he's an artist as well. It was nice to see Queen Victoria's watercolors. They were very sweet, perhaps a little bit naive, but sensationally, that they were wonderfully observed images of her dog, which apparently she used to work together on watercolors with her husband Prince Albert.
I know, because that was
etching plates together and things.
Yeah, that was her Skye Terrier, wasn't it, that was featured in those little ones?
Very small.
Yeah.
But you can just imagine. Well, upstairs as well, as you know, I was sticking with the royalty theme. There is the Queen and her corgi's photo exhibition just upstairs in the Wallace through the shop, so that you can see how Her Majesty the late Queen Elizabeth II also admired and loved dogs. Unfortunately, she never got into painting them. That wasn't her artistic bent. She was more a photographer. But some of the greatest portrait painters also encapsulate their love for their dog. What about Freud with his dog Pluto, or Hockney?
Exactly, both, and the whole Hockney room dedicated to the Daxies, and almost taking you into an immersive multimedia experience in that room, because
each with a different expression on their face, and also the body language of the dogs.
Yeah,
it made me smile. We all need to do that nowadays. It just really made me smile.
I know, in his dedication and love, obviously, for his taxis, you know, because there were little films, there's little films that you can watch of Hockney at work with his taxis, and he's got two assistants bringing the paper to him, bringing his
Yeah,
pencils, because if Hockney moved, the taxis would move, and he'd got them in the perfect kind of composition-ish, and then he's just sketching them. But again, it's like close real life. That's how he captures it, because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's in
And
the moment. Mm.
their coloring as well, really dynamic, really dynamic. But it's interesting as well that the Freud one, which was a very simple one, just of Pluto's grave.
That was heartbreaking. I mean, Estelle, because one there is a little oil, I think, of Pluto, quite a sketchy, undetailed kind of portrait. But then literally you move on a pace and there's his gravestone. And that, of course, is it, because dogs don't live long enough. It hits you hard,
Yeah,
but subtly, to remind us all that you've got to appreciate dogs in the moment. And I think that could be one of the themes of this collection.
yeah. No, I agree. I mean, they're not just our friends. They're not just delightful and sweet and comical and loving, but they're, all the good things sort of aren't around forever. And I think it makes us realize how precious time is. And we realize that, I think, through our dogs. The amount of enjoyment I get from going out for a walk with my dog is extraordinary. I think perhaps, is it just Londoners and New Yorkers that have this great love of dogs?
No, don't be silly. I think the love of dogs transcends humanity. But I think living in an urban metropolis is certainly more difficult. But, as a dog owner, you have to work harder because you have to train your dog to go on a bus and on a train and cope with joggers and cyclists
Yeah,
in the park and all the rest of it, compared to, say, in the shires. But I think that the cities offer such energy and enrichment and variety and stimulus and range of sensory delight, sounds, sight, sounds, and smells, for dogs, to keep them enriched, that I actually think city living done correctly with dogs, if you live near a big open space, is obviously ideal. I think dogs actually have a better life. But I'm a bit biased because I love London very much, Estelle,
yeah,
and that's why we're so lucky in London, because you can go to the Wallace Collection.
yeah, true, true. You know, ordinarily, some of the artworks are available to be seen in the Wallace collection generally, but collected together for this exhibition, it's really, it sort of condenses how we feel generally about our pets. And one of the stories that I really like is about the Gainsborough. Um, he had two crossbred mutts, and he kept over his mantelpiece this painting of them. He loved his two mutts, and whenever he and his wife had an argument, not being one to apologize, he would write a little note and sign it Fox, which was the name of one of his dogs, and the dog would walk over to Mrs. Gainsborough's dog, Tristram, that was the name of the other one, and hand this little note that Gainsborough had written, dog to dog. And then, of course, Mrs. Gainsborough would read it, and he'd be apologetic. But he'd use his dogs to make up with his wife after an argument.
I love
So I thought that was really nice. And
Oh, it's
also,
amazing. And look, oh my gosh, so and now we use text messages that are so, I mean,
yeah,
I'd much
yeah,
I'd much rather get a message, hand delivered, or from someone's dog. Amazing.
yeah, absolutely. And now, I mean, it's all become so impersonal. You can get fired or divorced by text nowadays. But then, for Gainsborough to use it to make up to his wife after an argument, this sorry note, I thought that was lovely. And also, what else is really interesting? That Freud's etchings, particularly of dogs, Freud's etchings of dogs are dearer to buy than his portraits. And obviously the reason for that is that unless you're buying it because you're a huge admirer and lover of Freud, you don't really want somebody else's face hanging up on your wall, do you? But if you buy one of his etchings of his dog, although it's his dog, it's still your dog, if you know what I mean. So his etchings are dearer than his human portraits.
Gosh, you know what? I didn't know that. And they must cost a huge amount then, but quite right, perhaps, I think.
Yeah. But you know as well, you were talking about Hogarth and the pug and how Hogarth's pug Trump almost looks comical, and then you were saying, which is really interesting, that this is before we created cartoons, be it on an iPad or whatever else it is. The use of dogs. There isn't any Charles Schulz Snoopy dogs there, but Snoop without Charles Schulz's dog, bit of a tongue twister that one. Without Charles Schulz's dog, Spike, that he had growing up, we never would have had Snoopy. So dogs are so inspirational to artists. They really fuel their sense of being, and I think it's because they provide unconditional love.
Yes.
And
I
it's
agree.
interesting because recently people have been talking about whether we should cancel Picasso, because they're saying that the way that he depicts women wasn't very nice. Hashtag not very nice. But when you look at the way that even Picasso depicted his dogs, and Picasso loved animals. He had a whole stable of different animals, going from pigeons to dogs to chimpanzees that used to steal his lunch and smoke a cigarette with him. It's really interesting how I think artists always feel as though they're being judged and always feel as though they have to prove themselves, because being an artist, is that a real job? Whereas drawing a dog, they're not judged. They're just loved.
It's really interesting that it's like dogs are their muse.
Yeah.
Rather than a human muse, because Picasso loved his Daxi called Lump.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what they say killed Picasso? They say that after Lump passed away, it was about 10 days later that Picasso died, and people say that he died of a broken heart because he missed his dog. Couldn't care about anything else. He missed his dog.
Well, if you ask me, I think anyone that dies of a broken heart because their dog was a good person. And I think, Picasso, without Picasso, we wouldn't be here today with art, So I think we have to.
Picasso is art. Picasso is the 20th century art world.
Indeed. And that is it. But look, Estelle, thank you, for joining us today. And I really hope you'll come back, because we can talk about dogs in art for ages and ages. And I think it's a really important subject, to understand our dogs today, because literally in that Wallace collection, there are ancestors of many of the dogs that we see in London today.
Yeah, and also let me just say, it's not just going to see it to understand the dogs. We go and see it and we'll understand ourselves better.
Absolutely. Thank you, Estelle.
Pleasure.
That's our show, Mr. Binks. What did you think? Yes, I know you're a fan of Sir Edwin Landseer for that amazing painting with one of your ancestors in from 1848. What's that? Yes, you're right. It's time for Woof of the Week. Never underestimate the power of art to define our history, particularly with dogs. Well, I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, go on, please rate and review the show wherever you tune into your podcasts. It really makes a difference. Thanks again to Estelle Lovatt for joining us today, and all the links are in the show notes. Thanks, of course, to Mike, my producer. and find out more about him at Pod People UK. And for me, I'm just at Anna Webb Dogs. What's that, Mr. Binks? Yes, you're right. We will be back in your feed next Sunday. So why don't you subscribe now? It is actually free. And that way, you'll never miss another show. Bye for now.